Our first speaker is Chiara Lipp. She's a teacher, a lecturer, and a doctorate candidate. She teaches and works on research of language education, policy, and multilingualism, and German didactics, which is something I would like to pursue personally later. And through enormous research and teaching, she's dealing with meeting points between cultures. And the title of her talk today is Language Education Policy Through the Eyes of a Child, a case study of children's perception and evaluation of school languages and language policy at a Jewish primary school in Germany. So, Chiara, the floor is yours.
So, thank you very much. The microphone is working? Perfect, okay. Yeah, hello and welcome to my presentation. I would love to present you my PhD project. Here you can see my agenda. So, of course, we will talk about my research questions, the motivation and relevance of my project, the state of research, the theoretical framework. I will tell you something about the Jewish primary schools and the Jewish community in Germany, what makes it special. And, of course, we will have an inside look into my data. First and foremost, research questions. So how do children at a Jewish primary school perceive their school's language policy and how do they evaluate it? You will later see that there's a difference between perceiving on the one hand and on the other hand, how do they actually evaluate it? I have other questions, so sub-questions. What meanings do the students associate with language policy in general? Do they know what that is? Do they have experiences with it? What are their wishes or expectations regarding the school language policy? So I didn't talk with them only about the status quo, but also about their wishes for their school and for the future. Also, how do children perceive their own role in shaping language policy? So if you talk about school language policy, a lot of times you talk about what rules are set by the school, by the government, but it's also about the children having an active role within the system. The last question, what connections do they see between Judaism and the individual languages used at school? You will later see that that differs a lot. Expectations from the school versus expectations from the students. Motivation and relevance of my project. So unfortunately, we still have a monolingual habitus in German schools. We also have an unequal treatment of languages, prestigious languages versus immigrant languages. Unfortunately, it is still like this. But more and more studies show that the integration of students' first languages in the school's language education policy strongly influences how children evaluate their own multilingualism. And Jewish primary schools in Germany represent a very unique form of language policy and a distinctive composition of the student body. So the state of research, as I said, it's proven that the cultural context and also the language policies at school and at home affect the children's agency. There was a study conducted in a Jewish school in Frankfurt that even found out that when you combine the students' languages in the school program, that it has a very great effect on their own perception. And language, of course, can also mark a person's belonging to a particular group or determine the status within. I'll give you an example. So in Germany, for example, of course, it's not common that all Jewish children speak Hebrew. But when they do their bar or bat mitzvah, they have to reach a certain level of Hebrew, so the status within this group changes for the child. My theoretical framework, I look at two different perspectives. On the one hand, language socialization between the children, and on the other hand, language education policy that goes on the level of the school. So, Jewish primary schools in Germany. So, within my PhD, I conducted a several smaller study, and I evaluated the school websites of the 10 Jewish primary schools that we had in Germany, because you have to know that these are all private schools, so they would really love students to attend. So they invest a lot in their websites. So it was really interesting for me how they present themselves. So as I said, we have 10 Jewish primary schools in Germany. These schools are often integrated into local Jewish communities, mostly Orthodox. We have one Masorti school, but all the others are Orthodox. From a legal aspect, they operate as all-day schools, but they are open to non-Jewish students. But they all have to attend the Jewish religious education and Hebrew classes. The legal status of these schools is they are state-recognized, substitute, and denominational schools. So what could I find out about these websites? First of all, and every website mentioned it, one primary goal is the development of a strong Jewish identity, achieved primarily through the transmission of Jewish traditions, prayers, and customs, which was interesting because none of them really defined what Jewish identity means. I think we all struggle with that, either in Israel or diaspora. What does it mean to be Jewish? Everybody used the term jüdische Identität. Nobody actually defined what it means. Learning Ivrit, so modern Hebrew, is considered a central goal in all of the schools. But alongside the language learning, the focus is also on religious and cultural values. I'll give you an example. So you don't just have a random text for learning the verb forms, you have the Hatikva, for example. Yeah. The Russian language, as a language of the student body, is intended to be incorporated into everyday school life through various options like after-school clubs, but there is no connection between the schools. So every school tries it because they, of course, know that a lot of students are Russian speakers, but there is no system behind it. Now we had the Jewish schools on the one hand. Now let's talk about the Jewish community. So after the Russian Jewish immigration to Germany in the 1990s, of course, we have a lot of pluralism in the Jewish communities in Germany. But a study found out, conducted by Körber, that most of these Jews understand their Judaism more as an ethnic descent community and not really religious. And non-religious parents go so far to say that subjects like Hebrew are considered a necessary burden and not really helpful for the integration into the labor market. So we have on the one hand the Jewish schools that really focus on Hebrew, on Israel, and the integration of Jewish values and traditions. And on the other hand, we have a Jewish community that is mostly secular and Russian-speaking. So what did I do in my PhD project? So how did I gain my data, basically? So I worked in a Jewish primary school, and I used workshops to connect and talk with the students and interviews. And together with the children, I had creative assignments, interviews. I analyzed data from the school. And also, I worked with picture books. Because human beings are visual, so I tried to make it a little bit more creative. Maybe I told it I'm actually a primary school teacher, so you might see it a little bit in there. I used different methods. Some of them I developed myself. You see on the left top, you see the language walks, Sprachenspaziergänge. That's a method I developed for my PhD. We will talk about it later. We also had language passports, we had language posters. So you see here, for example, a language poster, what do you connect with Ivrit? For example, Jerusalem, Klagemauer. What you cannot see, there was also a student that said, I don't like the teacher. Yeah, stuff like that. And of course, also, as I said, we don't just talk about the status quo, we also talk about the wishes. So children were able to create their dream school with their dream languages. And often, unfortunately, they fell into this thinking of like, state is gleich language. You know, we want to go away from that in German didactics. But, you know, Ukrainian flag, Israeli flag, and German flag. Okay, now it gets interesting. So here's some of my data. So what I did was I was guiding, so basically here's the book where I published it. So this method tries to help children being aware of the languages around them. So what I did, I gave them an empty paper. They just had the school, Spielplatz, the room for recess, then the way to the school. Here, the camera is like the entrance of the school, mathematics, German class, sports class, Kabbalat Shabbat, which is also a subject in Jewish schools in Germany, and cafeteria, okay, lunch break. And then I told them, stell dir vor, imagine, you come to school, like every day, you come by bus, you come by train, what languages do you hear? Just write them down. What languages do you hear? Don't even think, oh, how do I like that? No, just what do you hear, okay? And here we have 2 examples, and I would love to mention 3 things. First of all, I think you all notice that rooms or spaces that are not officially part of the school contain much more languages. For example, recess and also the way to school. Children told me afterwards that they feel that they are able to hear more languages because it's not restricted by professors and teachers. And that is hard to hear as a teacher, yeah? That children really notice that in these spaces, much more languages are heard. Second thing, what was, I would say, really, really interesting, you can see here, cafeteria, Ivrit, Russian, English. And we had this combination a lot. And I was asking the child, where's the German language? It disappeared. And what they said was, yeah, during lunch break, there is no teacher. They're just the Israeli FSJler, the Israeli intern, and they don't care how we speak, so we don't have to speak German. Okay. And then I was asking, why do you write 2 times Ivrit? Okay. And the child said, 1 is for the prayers, for the official prayers we say before and after the meals, and the 1 is just the normal Hebrew we speak. Okay. And the third really, really interesting one is in the sports lesson, you can see the language Spanish. And I know the teacher of PE class, and she doesn't speak Spanish, okay? And I read a lot of Spanish. I think 4 or 5 children put it. And then I was asking, where's the Spanish come from? Can you tell me? Yeah, because when they warm up for their exercises, the teacher loves to put Spanish songs. Yeah? And I was shocked how sensible a child is to the environment when it comes to the languages. Okay, now at the beginning I said, unfortunately, in German schools, monolingual habitus, stuff like that. So actually you could say, wow, this school is pretty cool, right? Because you hear a lot of languages. Even in the mathematics lesson, there's Russian. German lesson, Russian. Amazing, right? So I can stop my PhD right here and we're done. Not exactly. I brought you an interview with 2 students. These are not their real names, of course. So Liel, she comes from a family from Israel. She doesn't speak Russian. She came when she was about 4 years old. She came to Germany. Helene, her family is from Georgia. She also doesn't speak Russian. And I just wanted to read you what they said. Aber irgendwie finde ich das komisch, dass wir eine jüdische Schule sind und nur die russischen Kinder sind hier. Aber wenn, okay, die dürfen hier sein, aber wenn die ganze Zeit nur Russisch lernen, das darf man nicht. Das ist eine Regel. Aber wenn man hier zu dieser Schule kommen muss, also oder will, dann muss man die Ivrit-Sprache lernen, weil das eine jüdische Schule ist und keine Paruski-Schule. War schon hart zu lesen, ja. Und Helene sagt, ich sag auch noch was dazu. Man muss nicht das tun, aber es ist halt Unterricht und da muss man schon mitlernen. Und ich höre fast immer Russisch. Kurz noch auf Englisch, einfach, dass es alle nachvollziehen können. So basically what happened here was that we have kids that cannot follow the Russian language, okay, for several reasons. And what happens is that they feel excluded. And what also happens, and it was really interesting for me, is that neither of the children, I interviewed about 16 children, made the connection between Judaism and the Russian language. So nobody understood why there are so many kids in the school that speak Russian. Yeah, so I asked him as well, you see here, you hear Russian, you wrote Russian. Why is there so many the Russian language? And their answer was wild, to say the least. They said, you know, because it's a small school. You know, because it's a cheap school. I don't know. So they had no idea, nobody could tell me that, yeah, it's because a lot of Jewish people actually come from the former Soviet Union to Germany. 90% of Jewish people living in Germany right now speak Russian. I'm an exception, I don't speak Russian, I'm still Jewish, but I don't speak Russian. So it was really interesting for me as well. And it showed me that I come with my glasses, okay, and with my worldview, and I come to these children in this school, and they, open my eyes to completely different problems. So reading this, of course, I asked myself, what can I do with that? You know, what can I give advice to schools? I didn't mention that, but this PhD project is part of a program from the Land Baden-Württemberg that intends to make schools more inclusive. Okay, so we have to see how this will work based on also this data. I think the time slowly runs out. So thank you very, very much for your attention. And vielen Dank für die Aufmerksamkeit.